Let's hear it for the pizza. All right. So, as Justin said, my name is Dutkiewicz. If you're on Twitter, you may know me as Saduki. I actually do go by Saduki in most of my conferences, so. But I'm here tonight to talk with you guys about mentoring. So this is something I've been speaking about in various tech groups for quite a while. And I ran into Justin, and he's like, hey, wait, can you do this talk here? And I'm like, sure, why not? Growing up, something that my parents told me was that if you have talents and you recognize them, it's your job to put them to use for good. And so for me, it was one of those, I realized what I could do with tech, and I realized the power of learning this stuff fast. And so I learned how to teach that to others and how to coach them through mentoring. And this quote here, we make a living by what we get, but we live a life by what we give. This is the whole mentoring thing for me, is I'm giving that back to the community, helping raise that community. So there's a story behind this logo that sometimes you'll see me wearing a shirt with that on it. So I used to work for a coding boot camp, mentoring our apprentices. And so we're talking people who wanted to be in development as a second, third, or fourth career. And so it was one of those that I was like, okay, well, come on in, come play, it's fun. And one of my groups was just like, you know what? We need a name. It's like, okay. And on their last day of class, we do daily stand-up. So the whole going around the room, what are you working on? What do you expect to be done? Do you have any roadblocks? And so every morning we would do that. And on my last day with them, they said, start over here. Now, I'd never start my daily stand-ups in the same place back to back. I'm like, okay, but that's a third. That's not the full half. That's not a quarter. That's a weird spot. Weird quirkiness for me. Well, I'm like, okay, so I was like, all right, I'm supposed to start with you. Why do I need to start with you? She's like, I guess I'm the trigger. I'm like, the trigger for what? And all my apprentices opened up their hoodies, and they all had shirts with this logo on it. It was just like, what? But it was one of those that they appreciated the mentoring, and they bonded so well that they created a logo. They created representing Java, because that's what I was teaching them. And it's got all their names and stuff. So I'm like really proud when I see this. I'm like, this is what mentoring can do, is you get a team who will do stuff like that. But I run Cleveland Tech Consulting. I formed that in 2011, and I am an independent consultant. So if you have any questions on how to get mentoring in your company, come find me. I guess before I get too carried away, how many of you guys know what mentoring is and have mentors or are mentoring somebody currently? All right, so I see some hands. Some hands are good. The rest of you guys, hopefully by the end of this talk, this will inspire you to get in there more. So mentoring, I think of a mentor as somebody who's experienced and trusted. I've had informal mentors all of my life. I'm giving this talk tonight. It's a little sentimental for me because my first internship right out of high school was around the corner from here. And so driving past that going, my early days in tech were there. And I was just a lowly intern. Here's a data sheet. Make sure that the stuff in the database matched the data sheet. It's like, okay, fine. Doing my job, and then they assigned me to work with a contractor. And that contractor was like, hey, you like data, don't you? And I'm like, I do. He's like, I got a project, come here. And he had this project where he had to take an Access database and migrate the data to SQL Server and migrate the UI to Visual Basic. Now this was something I had already played with the VB to Access kind of thing, because as a hobbyist, and let's just say the kids I babysat were able to get me Visual Basic, and I was able to play around with it. So this is something I had tried out. So the contractor's like, so you know VB, let's take a look at SQL Server. I'm like, what's SQL Server? So I know SQL is like the second story. No, not that SQL. Like, okay. So he showed me SQL Server, and I learned databases from him that way. Well, he saw that anytime he talked about data, my eyes would light up. And that kid at Christmas feeling would come. I'm like, yes, data, I get to play. And he's like, you got to meet the Oracle DBA. Now here I am, 18-year-old kid, and I'm like, what's Oracle? Oh boy, I kind of regretted asking that question at first. I was like, Oracle? Okay. Meeting that DBA and seeing what an Oracle database looked like versus a SQL Server database versus an Access database, my heart was racing. I'm like, I love this, I want to do more data. Maybe not the Oracle stuff, maybe the SQL Server stuff, but I want to go play with data. For that contractor to see that curiosity and that energy, and then to help me further that by meeting other people who are working with it and to see what other things are out there. Yeah, that happened around the corner from here 20 years ago. So that was so cool to see. But I consider that guy one of my mentors. And fast forward, so about 16 years after that, I ended up running into the guy. He turned out to be working with me down in Akron in the Global Business Accelerator on the same floor. He was the director of software engineering for a company around the corner. Small world, we crashed into the elevator and I was like, Rich? He's like, Sarah? I'm like, I need to talk to you, dude. You impacted my career so much at that point because you saw the potential. You saw my curiosity. You weren't dismissive at all. You didn't shoot that down at all. You didn't ignore it. You saw that, you embraced it. You encouraged it. That will forever be in me, as that was something that I want to do for others as well. So for me, he was experienced, he was trusted, and he did an awesome job opening doors for me like that. And like this quote says, a mentor sees you for who you can be. They see the best in you, and they will do what they can to bring it out. There are going to be times when you're going to talk with those who mentor you, and you're going to be like, I don't know. I don't think I'm capable of this. There may be self-doubt, and that's normal. But the mentors, they see that in you. And even if there's self-doubt, they'll work past that self-doubt. They will pull that out of you and help you to see that you are capable of these things. So a little bit about Future Techies. So early in my career, I was mentoring other junior developers. Having a hobbyist background, it set me up fairly well to work with them. I was also mentoring a bunch of tech support people as well. I used to work for the Software Guild, and from August 2014 to December 2017, I mentored over 200 different apprentices. We're talking people of all different walks of life. We're talking of people who are young and right out of high school, seeing these guys come in with that same curiosity that I had when I was working around the corner from here. To see that continue on, I was so excited. I'm like, there are others. But I'm also seeing older people too. They're pursuing a second career, or a third, or fourth, or fifth career. They're coming from education, they're coming from linguistics, they're coming from math, they're coming from science, they're coming from art. I still remember one of our first apprentices we had in the program. She was a medical illustrationist. So if you think of like medical books and like all those drawings, she actually was drawing those. Now she's a developer and doing really well in the field, and that was in 2013. So she's still in the field and enjoying it. Some of the people I was mentoring had no technical experience whatsoever. In fact, they questioned themselves because some of their peers were senior developer types who were more interested in the new technology. So we were covering C#, we were covering Java, common enterprise languages. We were dealing with some COBOL developers and some C developers. So they had all this technical know-how. The people coming in with no experience, they were getting imposter syndrome, they were getting scared, they were worried, they're like, maybe I don't belong here, I don't have that same experience as these other people do. I'm not smart enough to be here. Those were the voices that they were having. And they realized that my personality, I'm very warm-hearted, very gentle-hearted. I'm also a mom. I have a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, so I'm a natural mom. But that mom personality also comes out when I'm mentoring. And so I tell it like it is, and I nurture when I need to. But talking with them, I'm just like, listen, never compare yourself to other people in the field. Worry about yourself. Are you better today than you were yesterday? If not, understand bad days happen. But overall, you should continue to be doing better for yourself. And understand that everybody in this room, we all come from different walks of life. You may have somebody who's been in security their whole career. You may have somebody who started in tech support and moved into various IT realms. You may have some developers in the room. But especially security. Security is one of those, having a diverse background in tech makes it that much more fun to do your job because now you have different angles that you know about. And your peers, they have different lifestyles, different perspectives too. And so being a mentor, it helps when you recognize that people have those different stories. And I'll talk about that in a slide later. But being aware of that and being able to work with people on that, that's important. And nowadays, I'm mentoring in the tech community. So I'm no longer working with apprentices, but I'm working with people who want to get into speaking. And I've been speaking for over 10 years in the tech field. So it's one of those, I kind of like riding a bike. You just get on and you do your thing. Same thing with organizing events. I've also been organizing events in the tech community for over 10 years. from user groups to conferences. I help with Star Trek, local user groups every now and then. So it's one of those that I work with those who want to do this because honestly, it's fun. I mean, you guys are here to use a group after your work hours, away from family, but why are you here? Because you want to learn more, because you're enjoying what you do. We need to include that and stress that to our future techies that this is fun. Now, I had to take a class back in, I want to say it's 2016, and something we had to do for that class was read this book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And there's a theme throughout the book that talks about how if you want something to happen, the universe conspires to make it happen. And when I read that book, I dropped the book. I dropped the book a few times, and I went upstairs and found my husband and said, "Kat, I found the quote." And he's like, "What quote?" Like, this quote that was probably plaguing me for quite a while, and I didn't know where it was. And so when I told him, he's like, "That explains a lot." I'm like, yes. For me, I think, when I see this quote, I think about the people who have been mentoring me throughout my career. And if I want something to happen, that I talk to them, things just kind of magically happen. And I'm like, why is that? Because the universe wants it to be that way. So this quote, this is something that I have hanging in my office. It's just something that will continue to remind me that as a mentor, listen to the people you're mentoring. They're going to tell you something. They're going to tell you something that is going to seem so trivial at that time, but then you're going to have an aha moment a month or two later, and you're like, you know what? That person said they wanted to learn more about this. Let me get them this resource. Let me show them how to use this particular piece of software that they didn't even know exists, but would make their eyes light up and would make them really excited. Now with mentorship, it's a two-way street. It's not just, I'm mentoring you on blah. What are you doing for the person who's mentoring you? And so the example I'm using here is Lady Ada and Charles Babbage. History for computers. So Charles Babbage, he did the analytical engine, and Lady Ada, she had a mentor, and that mentor, Mary Somerville, introduced her to Charles Babbage, because she thought that the two of them have two quirky personalities, so she figured that they'd get along well. Boy, was she right. Ada, like learning from Charles Babbage, he was a mathematician, he was really smart, really, the way he thought, she was very impressed with the way he thought. He, on the other hand, was very impressed with the way that she could just work with numbers. And not just work with numbers, she figured out his machine. His machine, not really straightforward for most people, is fairly technical. From everything I've read about him, he's been like one of those super smart guys who just can't talk to normal people because he's trapped in that mindset. She makes it approachable. She was able to document his machine so that other people could understand it. So he got to see her and the fact that she was excited by numbers and the way that she could explain that. And he continued to promote her for her awesome abilities. And by promote, I'm not talking like promoting like, okay, you went from a junior developer to an associate to whatever the path is. No, it was he was talking to other people about that, about what she was capable of. So that two-way street back then, I mean, look at where we've come from that to where we are today. Something else that talking with various people along the way. So I have to refer back to my dad. So my dad was a union leader. Growing up, my dad was a paramedic, and then he was union leader for the paramedics while still being a paramedic, dealing with politicians and such. So watching him lead people and take charge of people, and being a kid, what does dad know? I don't want to listen to him. At least that's what I thought back then. Nowadays I'm like, oh, I really did listen. Don't tell dad. But seriously, he had told me, when you go in the professional world, you want to find a mentor. You want to find somebody who's going to be able to help you. He's like, but honestly, Sarah, you don't want a mentor. You need to have multiple mentors. And I was like, well, multiple mentors actually make sense. Because for me, I mean, so I own Cleveland Tech Consulting. I'm an independent consultant. I know technology in terms of the stuff I've done in my past. I don't know new tech all the time. Like blockchain, I know it was a thing from CodeMash. Hear the word all the time. No idea. So you guys who know blockchain, I'm coming to you guys for what blockchain means and how it's relevant. So I would have mentors in that if I really wanted to go down that path. But I also have business mentors. I actually ran into one of the guys today who, he's like, yeah, he's like, so what are you doing now? And I'm like, oh boy, I don't have my elevator speech ready. I don't have my introduction ready. So that's what I'm working on tomorrow morning before I meet him. But having a mentor who keeps me honest on the business side. He runs a managed services provider, IT company for small and medium businesses essentially. But he's the one who asks me the challenging business sides of things as well. So and we've been talking about some tech businesses that have been going on lately and some of the downfalls that they've run into and how I can avoid those. So having multiple mentors with different perspectives really helps. Having multiple mentors on the same topic could help too because again, different stories, different perspectives, you never know what kind of clarity you'll get from that. Any questions so far? Feel free to stop me along the way and be like, hey, I got a question, or hey, I got a thought. All right, do you guys know about survivingtheworld.net? All right, so survivingtheworld.net, that's this guy here. So he does a webcomic of sorts where he writes quotes and draws pictures on his chalkboard. He is a professor. But one of the things he points out with leadership, and leadership and mentoring in this case are very similar, is that it's about responsibility, it's about action, it's about guidance, it's about outcome. It's not about a position or a title. It's not about, oh, I'm a vice president of whatever, or I am a tech lead of whatever. If people are going to you for your title, I would worry more. Because you are so much more than just a title. It's your experience that most people are going to see. And that they're going to be like, you know what, you did this really cool thing at Give Camp and I want to learn more about it and follow you guys on that. So these, the next few slides are including more of the stories that I have in the field and lessons from the field. I can't stress this enough in our, whether we're dealing with IT, whether we're dealing with developers, whatever we are doing in tech, I can't stress this enough. Check your egos at the door. Mentoring is not about you and your ego. Put it away. Mentoring is about helping others. There have been times where I've seen people get into ego wars over things, and it's like, why? What are you accomplishing? You're just deterring yourself from the actual problem you're trying to solve. Check your egos at the door. As mentors and as mentees, we need to be able to set expectations. We want to go into these mentoring relationships with clear guide of what we're getting ourselves into. What do we expect from this mentoring relationship? What's your availability? Now, like I mentioned, I'm a mom. So typically the evening hours, I'm usually home with my kids, making sure that they get dinner, playing games with them, Xbox, gotta teach them how to game early. Things like that, so I'm usually unavailable during that period of time. But I tell people, if you need to do mentoring, let's talk after kids are in bed. 9 o'clock to 11 o'clock, my kids are in bed, my husband and I are usually both doing work, so that works. Or during the day too. Or better yet, let's do lunch, let's get coffee. Anything to get out of the house and to get away from all the daily distractions so you can focus on the mentoring relationship, it's a good deal. In the mentoring relationship, you want to know, what are we focusing on? Are we focusing on how you can get better in tech? Are we focusing on how you want to become a speaker and how do we get you in there and what groups do we get you with? And are there any topics that we just can't talk about? Because I have some mentors and some mentees I've worked with who have said, I only want to focus on this small thing. And I don't want to talk about my personal life. Totally respect that. Set those boundaries. Set those boundaries early and set them clearly. All right, how many of you guys have heard of SMART goals or SMARTer goals? So another one of the things that came up in that class that I was taking was talking about SMART goals and SMARTer goals. So we'll talk about what that actually means. When you're doing mentoring, you guys want to go through this with the ability not just of setting expectations, but setting goals. How do you know that the mentoring relationship is going where it should? Are they making progress? Are they going the route you want them to? So the goals you want to set, they should be specific, they should be measurable, they should be actionable, they should be realistic, timely, exciting, and I always forget the R, relevant. So how do we do this? So a specific goal. I want to speak at Code Mash next year. Okay. Measurable. Well, how do I know that you've been going down that right path? Let's say I want to make sure that I have my slide by a certain date and time. Okay, date and time, that's measurable. X amount of slides, that's measurable. Actionable? Well, if you set a goal, there should be actions to be taken. You can't just say, I'm going to set a goal, and then magic happens. It doesn't work like that. Might work like that on TV. It doesn't work like that in real life. We can't write a script to just kind of make goals happen either. You can try. You can make it happen in text. You can write it to a console and say, hey, look, so-and-so accomplished a goal. It didn't actually happen, though. So, actionable. What kind of steps do you need to take to achieve that goal? Realistic. Realistic, something to keep in mind with the mentoring thing is your perspective of realistic and your mentor's perspective of realistic may be two different things. And then the universe's perspective of realistic could be something entirely different from that. That was something I experienced in 2017. It's one of those where I kind of restructured my business to take federal contracts a few weeks before an event. That shouldn't have happened, but the universe is like, oh, that's realistic, and I was like, I'm going to listen to the universe on this, but I don't think it's realistic. It actually happened. So, realistic, it's one of those that's very subjective. Timely, okay, if I want to speak at Code Mash next year, I know when Code Mash is happening. It's going to be sometime in January 2019. I don't know those dates off the top of my head, but I have a time to shoot for. Exciting. I have a conference that I'm going to be speaking at that's going to be fun. You ever go to that conference, you'll realize that the speakers are all excited about it for a reason. And then relevant, it's so that I get out of the network. Questions about SMART goals? Okay, how many of you guys know this guy? It's Mr. Rogers! I love Mr. Rogers. It was one of my favorite shows growing up. He teaches kids tough adult lessons, but he makes it very approachable. Nowadays, you might not see him on PBS, but if you have kids, Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, that's where it's at. First time I saw that, I was just crying, and my kids were like, Mama, why are you crying? Mama, why do you know his closing song? Because it's Mr. Rogers. Fred Rogers spoke a lot about public broadcasting and public TV and working with kids on TV and such. But this quote here, as a mentor, you really need to be your true, honest self. It is one of the greatest gifts you can give anybody. By being your true self, your authentic self, that authenticity, that comes across by other people. They see that you're being genuine. They can relate to you a lot better. People can tell if you're being fake. People can tell if you have a persona. It's one of those, you want to be honest, you want to be who you are, so that you're relatable, you're approachable. And never sugarcoat a situation, because nobody can learn from sugarcoating other than, oh, I'm doing good, yay. Oh, keep patting me on the head, yay. No, that's not teaching anybody anything. Your honest self, you should also be able to say, okay, this isn't working and here's why. As mentors, we need to go into our mentoring relationships with the attitude of trusting and respecting until burned. And the reason why I say that is because I've seen people talk to me and they're like, Sarah, trust and respect should be earned. You shouldn't just go into it. No, the thing is, you've got people approaching you who want to be mentored, and they already have that trust and respect for you. You need to reciprocate that for that relationship to be starting on the right path. If you started on rocky ground, oh, it's hard to bounce from a rocky ground into smooth sailing. Go into it smooth sailing. And then if trust is burned, or if respect is burned, if it's a learning experience and it's not one that's mortally wounding you, then make that learning experience the learning experience it is, and talk them through why it should be a learning experience. Talk them through, this didn't work out and here's why. We have to be able to tell them the here's why though, so they actually learn. Something else we have to do, because tech, we are filled with our opinions. Plain and simple, I could say something like, okay, what's your favorite web browser? I should hear 10 billion different answers. We don't always agree on the same things. We all have our thoughts and our opinions. Or for the developer types, object relational mappers versus actually writing your SQL by hand. There are particular feelings that we may have. They may be very strong one way or another. But as mentors, we need to bring our bias out of that and present the facts. Let the people that we're mentoring make their own decisions. Make them have their own views. They might be different from you, but you know what? You work with different people every day. People with different views. You figure out how to manage that. But the thing is, you're telling people, here are the facts, and letting them make that decision for themselves. Because if you push forward a bias, they may never understand the facts, and then when the facts are presented, well, my mentor told me this, and so now they've got that bias. And then that bias carries forward. Well, it's one thing to be like, yeah, I want my feelings to go forward with everybody else. You don't want them to keep pushing like myths forward. That's not a good thing. And encourage their curiosity. Again, what Rich did for me back at my first internship rings true today as to how I am the way I am and why I am the way I am. And I still have that curiosity. Again, being in the field over 15 years, I still have that curiosity. Working with newbies encourages that curiosity. Put yourself in your mentee's shoes. Try to think back to what it was like to be in that position. What would you do for you who were in that position? And putting yourself in their shoes is a tough thing sometimes, because sometimes it's been so long. You're like, oh God, I don't remember what that was like back then. Get them talking. The more stories they tell you, the more details come out, the more you can understand them, the more you can put yourself in their shoes. Learn their strengths, learn their weaknesses. The reason I say learn both is there are going to be times in their career where they're not sure what to do. Sometimes you can just look at the time and go, oh, we're pressed for time, let's push to those strengths. I know you're strong at XYZ, let's continue to push that. But if you look at your timeline and go, okay, they have this goal they want to achieve, and they need a little more guidance. Okay, they're weak here, let's see how we can take that weakness and make it better. As mentors, we have that vision that they don't see. They have self-doubt in the way. They have unknown in the way. We have experience that can help get them past that. And do lunch. This was a conference lunch from many conferences ago. But get out of the office. Get away from your desk, away from the distractions, away from that person who's going to stop by your cube and go, hey, did you get that report for me 2 minutes ago? Or hey, I just have a production fire. It'll only take 5 minutes. Famous last word. It'll only take 5 minutes. 5 hours later. Yeah. So get out of the office. Go to lunch. Put your phones away. Focus on the conversation at hand. Don't have your phone right there. Oh my God, my phone keeps vibrating. I gotta check it. No. Focus on the conversations, on the relationship. Because if you do that, you'd be surprised how much more successful the person is when they can actually have that conversation and that focus and they have your ear. And encourage questions. This I couldn't stress enough in my classroom especially, because they're afraid to ask questions. Like for me, I'm in a room full of most of you guys I've never seen before. Well, if I was in a classroom with you, if I were my apprentices, would be like, I can't ask a question. I don't know these guys, I'm going to look stupid. We need to encourage them that there are no dumb questions. If you have questions, ask them, because how many of you guys are running telepathy servers? Yeah, I know, we all wish it would exist. Those mind reading servers would be great, but they don't exist. We don't know what people are struggling with unless they ask questions. Same thing for us. People don't know if we have questions unless we ask those. And you can't always rely on somebody else in the room to ask those questions. So as a mentor, you need to encourage questions. You need to teach them that asking questions helps them to understand. Rephrasing questions. When people say they don't know what you're asking, other people get frustrated. Don't be frustrated. We want to encourage them to, okay, reword the question. Something else I'd like to tell them, again, Mom coming out says, use your words. Use the words that you already know. Something that newbie people in the tech field will panic about is there are a lot of terms. Authentication, authorization, what? Inheritance, interfaces? implementations, instantiations, these all sound similar to somebody who has no idea what any of these things mean. They all sound similar, they all sound related, we don't know what that means. We need to tell them that's okay that you don't know what that means, but you need to tell us that you don't know. So encourage those questions. And demystify questions too. How many of you guys recognize this guy? Mad Magazine folks, woohoo! I love Spy vs. Spy. And Spy vs. Spy vs. Spy, when she showed up, she's brutal. She's brutal. Anyhow, as mentors, we need to be able to demystify their questions. So there are going to be times when we have to do mock interviews or something to prepare them for the field. And so they're going to ask things like, well, what is the difference between authorization and authentication? What is red team? What is blue team? What is white hat? What is black hat? What are these terms that you guys use that I hear you guys talking to each other about? I don't know what those mean. We need to tell them that it's okay to say, I don't know what you guys are talking about. Can you clarify it for me because I have no clue? They need to know that that's okay. They need to realize nobody in this room knows everything. Because if somebody knows everything, oh my God, I feel so sorry for you. There's a lot to know in this world. But we all should know who everybody is and what they know, because then we can bounce ideas off of each other and go, oh, you know what, I don't know what blockchain is, but these guys do over here. And so we're there. You guys have now become the blockchain guys, sorry. One of the questions that my mentor likes to use in one of his interviews is, how many piano tuners are in the area? He runs a managed service provider, an IT for small and medium businesses. What do they care about piano tuners? However, as mentors, we can teach our mentees that this kind of question, the face value is not there. It's not about the face value of how many piano tuners are in the area. Richfield? No idea. I could hit Google and find out. But it's the how do you solve a problem you don't even know. That's what the people are looking for. Our mentees and people who encounter this question for the first time, I've seen people cry over this kind of question. Like, I don't know, I'm not going to get this job. I don't know how to figure out piano tuners. It's like, guys, that's not anything related. It's just how do you solve a problem with a lot of unknowns. And then there's the where do you see yourself in 5 years? 5 years is a long time. But it's one of those that, as mentors, we need to remind them that you don't want to look at just today. You want to see where you want to go in the future. Set goals to get there, and then keep working on them to achieve them. Now, with all these questions, we also need to be able to tell them that I don't know is okay to say. Because there are times where I can remember as a hiring manager, I would do interviews, and people would just start randomly answering things, and I'm just making notes. Going, okay, can this get any more absurd? Oh, yes, it can. And I'm like, just stop. Just stop and say, I don't know. Don't make up a story, especially if the interviewer is asking you something and they know it. Don't make up a story. It's not story time. Just say, I don't know. Okay, so then how do you handle I don't know? Is it a matter of I don't know any panic? In which case, as mentors, if we see the I don't know panic, we need to take a deep breath. Settle down. Not knowing is not the end of the world. All right, let's try this again now. I'm going to ask you the same question. You say, I don't know, and. I don't know, and I can seek an answer on a search engine. I don't know, and I can find out who the people are in the field who understand this and ask them questions. I don't know, and. Don't worry about the not knowing what to do, but at least make an attempt. But don't shut down and panic. Because if you do that in the interview, what are you going to do in the field? What are you going to do when you have a production fire and a whole bunch of I don't know? And you have very little time to get that fixed. Shutting down, not a wise thing. So as mentors, we need to tell them that I don't know is completely okay. As mentors, this is what we need to do. We need to teach them how to fish, not just give them a fish on a platter. Otherwise, they're going to keep coming to you every day. Hi, I'm here for another fish. Get out of here. I don't carry fish around here. I will teach you how to do something so that you learn how to do something. I will walk you through the steps. When I walk you through the steps, you will be doing this. I won't do it for you, because if I do it for you and you're watching me, you're not really getting anything out of it. But if you're doing it as I'm telling you, now you're getting the experience out of it. It's important that we as mentors and as mentees, we seek feedback and we give feedback. Honest feedback. Remember being our honest selves, being authentic? So if something isn't working, tell them why. Don't say, oh, this is awful, and then leave it at that. Or, man, that sucks, and then just walk out. Don't do that. Tell them, why isn't this working? What sucks? Oh, well, you're using tabs instead of spaces. Seriously? No. Have the conversation, though, of what's working, what's not working. And that's on the constructive side, or the criticism side, but also be positive. And say, you know what, you're doing a really good job at whatever they're doing. So in my last role, I was in charge of technical instructors. And we're all developer types, not teacher types by trade. So it was fun to watch them kind of adapt, and I would have to encourage them that you're doing the right thing. You're mentoring these people well, you're talking well, you're using examples that are relatable. I had to stress the positive because there's a lot of self-doubt. Don't forget the positive. Also, though, if you're doing negative, be clear as to why and how they can do better. Turn it into a learning experience, because that's what mentoring is. Mentoring is a lifelong experience, honestly. Listen to them and support them. Encourage them to talk. Encourage them to not be afraid, even though they are less experienced. If they're in a meeting with more people and they have that intuition that something isn't right, ask a question. Propose a solution. What they're afraid of is, oh, you guys have so many years of experience in the field, you know what's right. Hello? You guys have perspectives. You guys come from different walks of life. You might actually work in the field that we're writing code for, that we as developers, we don't have that experience. We have the experience of writing the software, but we may not necessarily have the experience of using it. You had that experience of using it? Speak up, tell us this so we can make a better usability thing. Encourage them to do that. Encourage them, if they're experiencing issues, to document everything. My first rise into management, unfortunately, was through a very tough decision. And it was one of those that we just had a very uncomfortable situation in my department, and my team was just like, what do we do? And we were all on the same team in a tech support thing, and they're just like, what do we do? I'm like, well, document, document, document. And that documentation was able to help us get a much better situation in the end, but they were just like, how did you know? I'm like, I deal with HR and accounting stuff. It's something I understand. If something isn't going right, you want to document things so that, one, you can see the trend, but two, so that other people can see that as well. So you need to encourage them. It's okay for them to write things down, and sometimes they kind of need to do it. As mentors, we need to push them out of their comfort zone. I am an introvert. I'm up here because I like to speak about this topic. This particular topic gets me super excited, but people drain me. That's me at the Peabody Opera House in St. Louis, Missouri, in front of 600 people. Introverted me that day was just like, I'm not showing up. I thought it was for a lunch, like a side topic. Not Peabody Opera House, not 600 people in front of me, no. No. The reason why I broke out of that was twofold. I have a mentor who was back at home in Columbus area, talking to him, and I was like, okay, I'm about to go center stage, Peabody Opera House, and I'm kind of freaking out. And he's an extrovert to my introvert, and he's like, you've got this. And I'm like, okay, fine. But then I was watching the time before my talk, and there were two girls from Columbia in South America, not the university. But they were coming in to talk about Rails Girls, which is an organization for getting girls into Ruby and Ruby on Rails. And so I'm looking at the time. They're supposed to be on stage in 10 minutes. They're supposed to be on the stage in 10 minutes, and they're nowhere to be found. All right, ladies, where do we go when we're all scared and we don't want to be presenting? Restroom. So I'm like, all right, I'm on a search and rescue mission. Of course, my friends are like, what? Just trust me on this. There's a stereotype there. We live that stereotype. We can tell you that. So sure enough, I went to the ladies' restroom, and I found the two girls there, and they were bawling. And I'm like, okay, that's where pre-mom me, because I didn't have kids at the time, but I still have that maternalness to me. I was just like, what's going on? Well, we're nervous. There's a lot of people out there. Yeah, so what? People are here because they want to hear what you have to say. They're here because they want to learn about Rails Girls. You guys are flown here because you're excited about it. But there's so many people. Just pretend that they're not there. Pretend that they're all your friends, because they're all your friends. Like, and honestly, the tech community, they're not, you may hear about bad guys, but for the most part, they're really cool people. They want to hear more, and better yet, they'll ask you if you're talk for more information. That little pep talk in the bathroom, that got them on stage. That also got me to feel a little more comfort, even though I was totally out of my comfort zone. Between that pep talk and having a mentor who's extroverted and pulls me out even though I'm kicking and screaming, it's awesome. So as mentors, we need to be able to have them step out of their comfort zones and encourage them. And sometimes you just kind of have to kick them off the ledge and watch them fly. It's okay. Encourage that they grow personally as well. It's not just, okay, here's technical stuff, but how do you grow as a human? Because we've all been growing as humans as well. Again, respecting career paths. We want to make sure that people come through this various careers. I mean, for me, I started in tech support. Came back to Cleveland in 2002 and not really any jobs. Like, okay, tech support will work. Moved into management. Moved into an IT department, doing some sysadmin stuff and phone admin and reporting, and then a DBA left, and DBA stuff on my lap, and then web development. And then back to consulting again, speaking and doing all sorts of stuff. So I had a crazy path. Some people are just starting, little footprints in the sand. Some of us have rocky paths, and you kind of have to respect that. Some of us have crazy paths that swirl in a circle. Understand that different people have different walks of life, and honestly respect that. Now, imposter syndrome. I mentioned that earlier. It is key to understanding how that happens. A lot of it is self-doubt. A lot of it is, do I belong in here? I had that feeling early on. Put it easily, I mean, being a woman in tech, I am a minority. I am very well aware of that. So there are times when I'm like in a room full of guys, I'm like, these guys are all smarter than me. These guys are, and I would always just be like, these guys are. I don't have that. And so I always had that going into it until I met my mentors who re-encouraged me to just go out there and do this. Helped me find that self-confidence. And some of the things that you'll see is new situations. I don't know if I could speak. I don't know if I could write code. I don't know if I could get into that system. I don't know if I could do a capture the flag at code mash while looking up an elephant for code. I don't know. Unpopular situations. Oh, as leaders and as mentors, you will have times where you might have to make an unpopular decision. Stick to your guns on that. High stress situations. Oh, imposter syndrome in high stress situations, that's key. That happens a lot. And I hate this phrase because people say it all the time. But at the same time, it's true. Fake it until you make it. Others are going to believe in the stuff that you're doing because you can show them. Your self-doubt is the biggest curtain in front of you. Your self-confidence, if you aren't confident in the steps you're taking, that self-doubt will continue to hinder you. You kind of have to keep doing it until you're like, you know what? I do have this and other people believe in me. Maybe I should believe in me too. So fake it till you make it. You hear it all the time. It actually has some truth to it. How many of you guys are working with environments that look something like this? Where you've got windows with a lot of panels here and there. The panels may not necessarily make sense. You open it and you go, oh my gosh. Somebody just starting would be like, what is this? And why are there so many of these different panels? So many folders on the side. So many folders here. What are they for? What do they do? I can't write code because there's too many folders. I don't understand how they work. All these windows, all these panels, so much noise, so much chaos. Somebody just starting out, they're not used to what we're used to every day. We open one of these and we're like, oh yeah, I know exactly what that is. This is this, this is this, this is this. Somebody opens it for the first time and they're like, I'm going to close this, I'm going to walk away, I'm going to go change careers so I don't have to see this again. And we need to tell them, this is normal. This isn't that scary either. And all the white space. Oh God, all that white space. I have to write code, I have to write a script, I have to write something. But there's just, it's all distraction. Or how many of you guys you go to run a program and you're like, options. How do I know what project to choose? How do I know which tools to use? Or, God forbid, if you're in mobile development, okay, what platform or platforms are we developing for? Again, options. So many choices that newbies, when they're starting out, are like, I don't even know where to start. We who've had experience in the field, we need to have those conversations with them that maybe you do need to do watch development because that's what your client really wants you to focus on. Or maybe, you know what, you need to work on all platforms and here's why. Finally, something else I need to point out is that there may be gender concerns. Again, I mentioned as a woman in tech, pretty much a minority. Does that stop me from doing my job? No. Should my gender matter? No. Who are my mentors? Mostly white males. Why? Because that's how the field is. I don't care that they're male. I don't care at all. I care for the experience and the cool stories they share. So the gender concerns, you're going to find some people really are concerned about the stuff that they do and that gender matters. Shouldn't. Gentlemen, if you have a lady that you're mentoring and she has questions about how do you handle this, and it's a women in tech kind of thing and you're not sure how to handle it, reach out to the other ladies in the field. I'm Suzuki. My email address is, if it's not on here, I'll make sure you guys have it. You guys can always reach out to me for women in tech questions if you have anything. Nothing's going to offend me, so. All right, so all this talk about mentoring, where do we go to find a mentor? Where do we go to, I want to mentor somebody today, or I need to find a mentor on blah. Well, there's this quote here, and actually this is a little misplaced. This Condoleezza Rice was talking about trying to find a mentor in her field. How many black female Soviet specialists are out there? I think she's in. If she had waited, she'd still be waiting for a mentor. But, so she didn't let that stop her at all. Didn't let her race, didn't let her gender slow her down. Her mentors were white males because that's what the field's made out of. That's why I say, demographics and finding that, I would say don't include those as something to be concerned about. Look for people who've got the experiences that you're like, I like what they did. I want to learn more. I want to see what they do. So, so where can we find mentors? How many of you guys know about Cleveland Tech Slack? Oh, some, okay. So, Slack, you guys are at least familiar with Slack. Think of it like IRC, only messages actually stay a little bit longer. So Cleveland Tech Slack, if you have questions on how to get on there, follow me on Twitter and direct message me. My DMs should be open. Send me your email address and I'll send you an invite. It looks like the Heroku app was down earlier today. But so this is for the Cleveland Tech community. And by Cleveland, I mean Cleveland, Akron, Canton, Northeast Ohio, essentially. But a bunch of us are native Clevelanders, so. Well, I started a mentoring channel today, and it's all sorts of chaos in there because everybody wants to mentor or talk about mentoring or are looking for mentors. So it's doing what it's supposed to. So come to the mentoring channel on there. You can find some companies have formal mentoring programs. If you're at a company where you want to build a formal mentoring program, come see me and we can talk about this afterwards. But you can usually find somebody, maybe you have a boss, or you have a more experienced colleague on a project that you can go to for as a mentor. Like I said, some companies do have formal mentoring programs. I was reading a book recently where they had like their executives and their C-levels mentoring people who are just getting into the field. Such a night and day, but it forces those who have been at the C-levels and the VP levels to realize what it's like to be just starting out. And it makes those who are just starting out realize that those C-levels, the VP levels, the executive levels are actually normal people. They're not just, oh my God, it's a title. No, they're actually down-to-earth people, and you'd be surprised. Where else can you find mentoring? Well, outside a company as well. I mean, there are various websites out there, or come to one of these events. I mean, you guys are all here. Do you guys talk to each other? Heard a lot of talking with pizza and such. Talk to each other, and if you find something interesting about that person, talk with them. Mentoring doesn't have to be a formal thing. You can have informal relationships as well. Most of my mentors are friends at this point because we've been talking for so long. But go to conferences or keep coming to user groups. There's a website called MentorNet. I learned about this back in the late 90s, and it's still thriving today. Its focus is on STEM. And then mentoring.org, which has also been around for quite a while, has mentoring programs. And like I said, locally, come play in Slack, because we have people not just from security or .NET or functional languages or C# or SQL or any topic really. everybody in there under all walks of life. These are just some of the other groups that are out there. IEEE, of course, in the professional space. In the academia world, Women in Technology has a website. There's a group in Canada called iSisters. And MicroMentor is another one that I found just recently. And these slides will be available on SlideShare, and I will tweet about it, and then sure NEOISF will also retweet it. So we'll make sure that you guys get that. I'll also make sure that Justin has it so he can get that out to you guys as well. Now, one of my trips out to Microsoft, so I go out to Microsoft 1 week a year, meet with Microsoft Most Valuable Professionals, basically meeting the guys who create the tools, giving them feedback and such. I love going out there. The Visitor Center had this slide, and I saw this, and I was like, you know what, this is important for me to put in a presentation, because it's true. This rings true for mentors, too. Our mission is to empower everybody to achieve more. So this is something we need to just kind of do. I'm going to end this talk with a quote that kind of fell into my lap. It was one of those that early 2000s, our DBA up and left at a manufacturing firm, and I'm like, well, that was kind of rough. Went over to her cube, and she had this quote on her on a post-it in there, and I was like, I like this quote. Because as mentors, we can inspire them with something like this. Where 20 years from now, you're going to be disappointed about the things you didn't do, rather than the things you did do. So you need to tell them to catch the trade winds, explore, dream, discover. So go forward and mentor and help grow our techies so that tech continues to be awesome. Thank you.
Any questions for her? Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Probably take another 5 minutes, and then begin with our second job.
Just set it down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Test, test. Test, test.
No, I don't have time for.
Need to do
Anything in specific? There it is. Have to hold it for a little bit. All right. Thanks, guys, for having me. And thanks, Ben, for making it happen. Ben knew I was going to be in town, said, hey, Mark's got opinions, why don't you come drop some opinions on people. My name is Mark Overholser. I am a systems engineer for Palo Alto Networks, and specifically I work in the behavioral analytics field, the behavioral analysis field, for the past 2.5 years, right? So I was on the customer side of things. I was, I worked my way up to being the team lead of information security at a medical supply manufacturing and distribution company in the Midwest. And then I went to the dark side. I went to go join a startup vendor called LightCyber, and did that for a couple of years, and then we got eaten by Palo Alto Networks, and I'm part of the Palo Alto Networks machine here. And so these, a brief word about bias, of course, I fully acknowledge that I work for a vendor. This, there's bias in how this presentation is, not necessarily because I'm beholden to the vendor, but because by working for a vendor, that affects like the information that comes across my desk, the things that I have access to, right? So I want to encourage you all not just to listen to me, but also to seek out other points of view, other opinions, right, about these sorts of things, and to, of course, think about them critically. I don't think it should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. So first things first, what this presentation is designed to do is not to talk about any specific product, but to kind of talk about behavioral analytics more generically, and to kind of give you some of the things that I've noticed from my 2.5 years working in this space, to help you start to think more about it, to zoom out a little bit, right, and not just look at what the gardeners are saying and the foresters are saying and listening to that, right? So starting from the very beginning, what is behavioral analytics? And to me, what behavioral analytics is it's using data about actions to point out or draw conclusions about behaviors. And I've emphasized the words actions and behaviors there because they represent two different scopes when you're looking at this sort of thing, right? An action, to me, is individual in nature. Throwing a dart at a dartboard, that's an action. But behaviors are broader patterns. They're made up of individual actions, which are related to each other in some way. Playing darts is a behavior. You throw multiple darts. Each of those things is an action unto itself. But when you combine them, then you get this behavior of playing darts, right? So it's about zooming out. Behavioral analytics is. To me, also, behavioral analytics is not a distinct product category like firewall or antivirus or some of the others. To me, it is a technique that adds value to existing products or existing product categories, and by helping to increase automation. So a lot of people will come around and actually say, like, I got a behavioral analytics product. No, you don't. You have a product that does behavioral analytics. You need to know more than just it's a behavioral analytics product. It's very easy if somebody walks up to you and says, I have an antivirus product. You can make a lot of general assumptions about what that's going to do, right? How it's going to work, what the inputs are going to be. To me, that's a product category. But right now, there's a lot of hype. Obviously, there's also a lot of ambiguity that comes with this, the whole behavioral analytics category, because it hasn't crystallized, it hasn't solidified, and in fact, it's probably going to become like 15 different product categories in the course of the next decade or something. So the technique of behavioral analytics can be used to detect multiple things. One is behaviors which are only apparent when several distinct actions are considered together, when they're placed into the same context and considered together. That's what I talked about earlier about zooming out, right? Being able to consider several actions together to filter out the behavior. It can also be used to detect things that behave significantly differently than their peers, things that behave differently than their peers, and to detect things that behave significantly different than their past behavior. And these are all different kind of sub-techniques that work inside that realm, but they all play together. And we'll go through several analogies to kind of help you think better about these, right? So I have this one analogy that I really like to use, it's the rain analogy. And I relate this back to technology, right? We're familiar with signature-based detection solutions like antivirus, like an IPS, something like that. they focus on individual actions, they focus on individual artifacts, they focus on individual IOCs, because these things are easy to store, and they're easy to compare in real time using pattern matching techniques that we have, in computer science. They work really well. So we think about things like antivirus, think about network intrusion detection or intrusion prevention systems, firewalls. They look at individual flows, individual packets, individual files, individual segments of a file, and they compare them against this database of artifacts and IOCs to look for matches. And it works very, very quickly, and it works very, very well. But if we take this and we move over into this rain analogy, this is like building a system that detects a raindrop and sends you an alert message. For each raindrop, you get a separate alert. That's not, I mean, there is some value in detecting those things, but then you have to hire an analyst, look at the patterns of raindrop alerts, and then determine, oh, is it raining? Okay, cool. Where is it raining? Is there a possibility that somebody just spilled a bottle of water on the lawn? And was it an isolated raindrop? Was it a light drizzle? Was it a torrential downpour? How bad is it? Right? There's all these things that you have to do if you're dealing with all these individual alerts. So the value then in a system like that is that behavioral analytics becomes like a Doppler radar system. I'm sure that's a trademark somebody. And what it does is shows all the raindrops together, so it's easy to recognize the patterns. With behavioral analytics, you can zoom out, build systems that look at the raindrops and automatically determine where is it raining, how hard, and help give you that information so you don't have to manually do that, right? Help automate some of the analyst's work. Instead of looking for patterns, looking for deviations, the analyst can focus on validating and triaging and reacting to the alerts in a reasonable amount of time. Another example here, think of a simple TCP port scan. Now we're taking this and we're moving it actually into the technical realm, right? A TCP SYN port scan. Attacker sends several SYN packets, synchronized packets, to one or more destinations. This depends on if it's a horizontal port scan or a vertical port scan, right? Are you looking for services across many IP addresses in a range? Or are you looking at a specific IP address trying to figure out what services are running on it? Are you doing both? Are you scanning vertically across a horizontal range? So send a bunch of SYN packets and then observe the response or observe the lack of response and infer, is there a service running there? Did I get a SYN-ACK? Oh, there's a service running there. Did I get a reset? There's not a service running there. Did I not get a response within a certain number of milliseconds or seconds? That sort of thing. If you look at each of those connection attempts, there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing, as long as the attacker is not setting the evil bit in their TCP headers, feel free to laugh, then there's nothing you can do as a defender to look at each individual connection and say, oh, that was an attack. It's only when you zoom out and you consider all of the packets together that you can then see the pattern, right? So that's similar to that RAIN analogy, but talking specifically about networking in that case, right? So it's only when you zoom out, look at the group of packets, look at them in the context of each other that you can determine that there's a pattern there. That's the only time when the behavior becomes apparent. You can't look at any individual connection and say, that was an evil connection. A different analogy, start talking about people and their behaviors. I call this just the first friend analogy, but it's time-based profiling. Say you have a friend who only eats sandwiches on white bread. Every time you see them eating a sandwich, they're only ever eating a sandwich on white bread. And one day, you see your friend eating a sandwich on wheat bread. This is weird. But it's only weird because every time you've seen him eating a sandwich in the past, he had white bread. You have to know the past history of that person's eating habits in order to know that that's strange, right? Other people who walked in the lunchroom and it was their first day, they would not think it's weird because they had no context from the past history, the past behavior of that person. I call this, or we in general call this, time-based analysis or time-based profiling. You have to know the past history of that entity, whether it's a person or a program or a network device. You need to know that in order to figure out if the behavior has changed suddenly. We take that, we move that into the technical realm. You can consider something like an attacker using PowerShell or PSExec or some other remote management utility to perform a credentialed, authorized action against another machine in the network, right? Say you have stolen credentials and you use PowerShell to PS remote to another Windows machine on the network and start up a process. Authentication successful. Can't look for failed authentication there to figure out if it's wrong, right? There's no exploit being used. There's no IPS is going to necessarily detect that because there's not some malformed packets or anything like that. But a behavioral analytics engine could determine how likely this is to happen based on the past behavior of that source device, based on the past behavior of the person authenticated to that source device. You know, if it's a person who normally does this, who normally executes WMI or RPC queries against another machine on the network, then maybe it's not weird. But if it's a person who never does this sort of thing and then they start to do it, that's an interesting behavior, right? So that's it's similar to the sandwich analogy. But it requires learning from the past, comparing the current behavior to the past behavior. Again, time-based profiling. Friend analogy number 2, another sandwich analogy. I like sandwiches, I like food in general. Peer-based profiling. You have a friend, different friend. They eat sandwiches with the crust removed. We can all agree this is a valid life decision. There's nothing wrong with it, but it is still weird. It's weird because a small number of people do it, right? Those people are children. I'm sorry if anybody in the room likes the crust removed. Yeah, I'm joking with you guys. It's strange because the majority of people just leave the crust on. It's because it's delicious. So when you look for anomalies within a group based on the majority of the peer group's behavior, we call that peer-based analysis or peer-based profiling. And we move that into the technical realm again. Consider like an intruder compromises a machine within a network, and then they establish a command and control channel, HTTPS, to a newly registered internet domain. Brand new IP address, brand new domain, neither is blacklisted. You can't look at that and say that it's bad just by the IP address. If the IP address is not on any blacklists. Same with the domain name. If it's not on any blacklists, you're kind of hosed there, right? If the traffic is encrypted, either because it's just, you know, TLS encrypted or because there's some other encryption being used in an additional layer inside the application layer, you wouldn't necessarily be able to inspect and look for known patterns and say, if this looks like the same structure, you know, this field is here and this field is there. You can do that in some cases, but let's just for the sake of this argument, let's assume there's some encryption that prevents you from doing that. What you can do still is retrospectively compare the traffic against other traffic from the same network. So you can learn things like, what is the relative popularity of that destination? How many people in the network are going to that destination? How often are they going to that destination? How repetitive is that traffic? So you could look for things like repetitive traffic to an unpopular domain, and then you can flag that for follow-up, right? It could be a new command and control domain. But this requires looking at data about many connections from multiple devices in order to establish a baseline, because you need the baseline to look for the abnormality, to look for the abnormal behavior. So one connection individually does not contain enough information to locate the behavior. You have to consider all of the connections, and you have to consider all of the destinations. And then in the end, the behavior can be considered strange because the majority of peer devices do not do this. Unless, of course, the attacker compromises all the devices in your network, in which case, you need to update your resume. Another term that comes up frequently in this field is machine learning. And I'm not going to go deep down the rabbit hole here, but there's kind of at a high level, I want to make sure we're aware of a couple different types of machine learning that can be used. But in general, machine learning algorithms, it's a mathematical technique, right? And a computer science technique that allow computer programs to learn how to look for interesting things. The programs can learn how to look for them. Instead of having people teach them how to look for them, they can teach themselves. And there are kind of two major categories. Those are supervised machine learning and unsupervised machine learning. So the supervised machine learning category, we use labeled data sets where humans supply good labeled data for the algorithm to learn from. So the human supplies the data and says, this is X, this is Y, here you go, here's the goal, figure it out. And the computer program figures it out. So once the system is trained, it can then produce classifications for future data. Classic example here, malware detection engines using labeled data to detect new variants of malware strains. So you feed in a bunch of data, and you say, here's all the malware, here's all the files that are not malware, here's your objective computer. I want you to label all of the malware malware, and I want you to label all of the not malware not malware. And you lose points anytime you label a good file as malware, and you lose points anytime you fail to label malware as malware. And then the computer figures out, I'm going to look at all these crazy attributes and just try to figure out what is the best way to do this. And then it comes up with its own set, and then you can apply that to other unlabeled data and get consistent labeling out of that too, right? So that's kind of how that works. Pseudo IPS as well. There are some variants of IPS software that will look for network traffic that looks like command and control based, again, on like inspecting the data inside the HTTP connection if that's available, right? Or looking at other things like interpacket timings and other things that I can't think of off the top of my head here. But supervised machine learning is useful in certain categories, but we need to be aware of its drawbacks as well. It's very, very rigid, very brittle. And that means that if anything changes after classification, those rules no longer apply. They no longer work. So if an attacker knows what the characteristics are for the training set, they can just change those characteristics. And then it doesn't work anymore. And we see this all the time with antivirus, right? It's that new variants don't get flagged, and then attackers realize, oh, if I just change this and this and this, and then change it every time, you never can build your rule set to catch me. Or once they detect that they're being caught, they can quickly pivot. And another drawback is that it only knows how to classify things based on things it has already been trained on. So totally new categories, totally new items that don't follow any of the previous traits or follow any of the previous trends, they will not be caught. And they will require a new training set, new data to be able to adapt to that, right? So it's very brittle, very, it's useful for classifying huge numbers of things, but you better hope that it's not adversarial, because adversaries can evade that very quickly and easily. Unsupervised machine learning, those techniques draw a conclusion from unlabeled data sets. And the easiest to think about, of course, is anomaly detection. So the larger data set is used to create a baseline of normalcy, and then the algorithm looks for anomalies. And these are what we talked about earlier, things like comparing an individual's current behavior to their past behavior, and comparing an individual's current behavior to their peers' current behavior for the same time period to look for anomalies there. Anomaly detection is a big part of this. And this is much better able to adapt to changing conditions over time, as new baselines are calculated as time goes on, right? So you can keep calculating new baselines as you have new data, and you don't have to label the data. Machine learning, different approaches, different results, right? So these are the kinds of things you want to be considering if you're looking at somebody that's talking about that they're doing machine learning in their product. You want to be asking these questions. Who performs the analysis? What is being analyzed? Where is this analysis happening? When is this analysis happening? Because if you look, if you have something like a vendor performing the analysis versus the product performing the analysis, the vendor's performing the analysis, and they're doing it on objects, and they're doing it in their laboratory, they're doing it before deployment with the objective of creating signatures via supervised machine learning. What you get is more signatures. You get another known bad system, right? Known bad, where you have this thing that can classify stuff and tell you whether it's good or bad. Versus if you have a product that is doing the analysis, the product is doing it on your network, on your premises, or specific to you, and is doing it on activity, for instance, like metadata or logs, in a production system, during usage, not before deployment, but during usage, and with the objective of learning a baseline using unsupervised machine learning, what you get is a known good model. So it learns what's normal, and then can point out the abnormal. And I think that there's a case for having both, right? They complement each other. kind of alluded to this earlier, but a quick sidebar about product categories. I mentioned that I don't believe that behavioral analytics is a product category unto itself. I'm going to explain why here, kind of give you a little bit more why I think this, what, data to back this up. In my opinion, product categories are defined by three things: context, a technique, and a goal. And you can also think of this as inputs, processing, and outputs. Context, technique, goal, inputs, processing, outputs. If you change any one of them, you get a new product category. Any one of them. And you can't always substitute one product category for another. Sometimes you can, but you need to understand that there may be a trade-off. Network antivirus and file system antivirus, two different product categories, I think we can all agree on that. And they both have antivirus in their name. But you can't substitute them for each other, right? If you have devices on your network that you can't run antivirus on, for instance, printers, right? So they still have computing in them, they can still be compromised. But you can't install McAfee on your printer. At least I can't. I failed every time I've tried. It can be useful to have a network antivirus to help protect those devices, right? Because you can't install antivirus on them. But if you have devices, say you relied on network antivirus, the problem you have then is you can't ever let your devices leave your network. You have mobile laptops on your network, and you're reliant upon a network antivirus to protect them. As soon as you let them leave your network, they're no longer within the comfort of your protection, right? So you can't substitute both. They complement each other, even though they both have antivirus in the title. So what I have here is this table where I'm talking about the context, the technique, and the goal, right? The inputs, how they're processed, and the outputs. And then I have the results in the product category on the right. So we start at the top. The context, within the context of network traffic, the technique being used is pattern matching, and the goal is to detect sensitive data. To me, that sounds like data loss prevention, DLP. And if we then change just one thing, we just change the context from network traffic to file system. So it's file system data, that's where we're working. We're still doing pattern matching, and our goal is still to detect sensitive data. Then it becomes a data classification product instead of a DLP product. And there may be some crossover into DLP, but it's a different category. Now we change one thing again. This time we're going to change the goal. So it's still going to be on the file system. We're still going to be doing pattern matching, but now the goal is to detect and prevent malware. It's antivirus. Totally different product category. Can't be substituted for DLP in any way. Again, changing one thing. Now we're still going to do pattern matching. We're still going to have the goal of detecting and preventing malware, but this time instead we're going to do it on network traffic. Then we get network antivirus. Still can't substitute it, right? Changing one thing again. Now we're changing our goal again from detecting and preventing malware to detecting exploitation attempts, but we're still doing it on network traffic and we're still doing pattern matching. Now it's network IDS. Change the goal again from detecting exploitation attempts to preventing exploitation attempts, and you get network IPS. Instead of intrusion detection, now it's intrusion prevention. Different product category. In my opinion, you can't substitute these things for each other. They can be considered complementary technologies, with, I guess, one exception, and that is that you can substitute network IPS for network IDS because it's a superset. But you see what I'm saying there, right? Like, anytime you change any one of those things, now it's a different product category. I never changed the technique in there, but you can substitute that, right? If we're working on network traffic, and we'd have to change our goals as well, but we could get to firewall, we could get to any number of other things, right? By just changing those things. Changing the technique would do the same thing. So keep that in mind when you're talking to vendors about something that does behavioral analytics or is behavioral analytics. What is the context? Where is that happening? What is the goal? To me, that's the most important. What is the goal? And what are your goals? So make sure those things are aligned. And then what is the technique? And there can be multiple techniques within a single product even, right? So say you want to dip your toe in the water here. How to evaluate a solution or how to select a solution? First of all, don't just issue an RFP for behavioral analytics, because it's not a product, it's a technique. and you'll get a lot of applicants for wildly different things. So save yourself some work. Think about what your goal is. And then, if you want to do the RFP thing, issue an RFP that clearly states your goal and what the limitations are for solving that goal, right? So what is the goal of your project? Is it to detect attacker behavior inside the network? Is it to detect malware in network traffic? Is it to detect malware on endpoints? Is it to detect fraudulent credit card transactions? Some of these things could benefit from behavioral analytics. Some of them cannot. So think about that and think about what is your goal. That's the most important thing. What is your goal? What is the problem you are trying to solve? And that's the thing that you need to clearly articulate to any vendor that comes across your desk, and then ask them how they would solve that goal. And if they can't, hopefully they will tell you that. And then you can say, well, thank you. I have time that I need to spend elsewhere right now. So each of these approaches requires different solutions. They are not interchangeable. So ask the vendor, what is the source of the data? Is it from network traffic? Is it from log data? Is it from endpoint agents? And then consider, more importantly, are you prepared as an individual and as an organization, are you prepared to maintain that source of data? Are you good at supplying network traffic to things? Are you a network-heavy organization? Do you have people with network specialty? Then maybe that's where your focus wants to be. Are you much better at maintaining log data? Are you good at aggregating log data from multiple sources and maintaining syslog servers and maintaining a data lake? Maybe you would prefer something that works from log data if you're better at that. Endpoint agents. Are you really good at deploying and maintaining endpoint agents? No, nobody is. Fewer the better, right? Ask the vendor what the goal is of their product, or what the problem is that they solve, and make sure that it fits your needs. I've said that a couple times, but bears repeating, right? If machine learning is used, ask the vendor where and when the learning takes place. Does it happen in their lab in advance? Does it happen in your network after deployment? And then consider, what are the pros and cons of that? How does that help or hurt you and your goals, and how that aligns? Ask whether they recommend you purchase additional ongoing services to review the output of the product. Most systems that use a heuristic approach require human review of the output. And that's because, I didn't really talk about it in the presentation, but I'll talk about it now. Normal and abnormal are things that a computer can infer, but good and bad are human constructs. There's extra human context that goes into making that decision. And so a computer can't decide that for you, yet. When it can, we assume they will try to kill us. Whether a vendor recommends that you subscribe to their review service, and if they offer one, right? If they offer a review service to go through the alerts for you or with you, if they have that sort of service, that will tell you a lot about the level of expertise regulated, or the level of expertise required to investigate those alerts, right? If they have more services for going through that thing, chances are it might require more of those services to work. Because a lot of their customers probably asked for that because they got into it and then realized that they didn't have the resources to go through all the alerts. And the absolute #1 most important thing that everyone should be telling you is that if you're going to evaluate a product, you should try it on your own network, and you should try it under realistic conditions. Don't do it in the lab. Figure out a way to do it in production. Do it in a way that you don't affect production, but you should do it in a lab, especially with behavioral analytics. Like, it's a lot easier to stand up an antivirus or an antivirus replacement or a next-gen endpoint protection or whatever have you in an environment and feed in a bunch of malware samples that you've collected over the years that you've had infected machines in your network. That's easy to do in a lab, right? You can set up an isolated machine, feed stuff in, and see what gets caught, what does not, et cetera, et cetera. Behavioral analytics solutions require combing through lots of data. Lab systems don't generate enough data for it to be able to do the kind of math that it needs to do to look for anomalies, right? So keep that in mind. Try products in your own network under realistic conditions. There is absolutely no substitute for seeing it work in your own network. You will not be able to put it through the same kind of paces in a lab environment that you would be able to in a production environment. Short and sweet. Are there any questions? Are there any jokes you would like me to repeat? Yes, sir.
Wouldn't it be best to put it in a test environment?
Wouldn't it be best to put something in a test environment?
The product behavior.
So when you say a test environment, what do you mean by test environment?
One step removed from production.
One step removed from production. So like a large copy of a production environment. It will depend, right? So the test environments that I have come from were test environments where users did not go, right? All the users went to production. So there's a potential source of data that if you ran a product in the test environment, you might be depriving it of some major source of data if there aren't actual production level users hitting that environment, right?
Well, you can control that by having representative users allowed into that environment.
You could potentially control it by having a representative set of users, like a sample of users going into the test environment. You could, but it would not be the same quantity of data.
True.
So it will vary, right, on a product by product basis. It will really depend on what inputs the product is looking for. If it's looking for in logs and looking at logs of application traffic from application to application within an environment, a test environment may be perfectly suited for this. One other thing to consider is that if it's not going to affect the production environment, say it's passively listening to things, and the outputs are not going to affect firewall rules or ACLs or things like that, then it may still be okay to put it in a production environment. In those circumstances, I would recommend that. But yeah, if you're gun shy about putting something in production, and it's, of course, really good to think about these things in advance, right? A test environment could be suitable, but it will depend. You really have to consider like what is happening in the test environment, and is that representative or comparable to what's happening in the production environment.
The end result is you get some kind of feedback in order to make an analysis of what you got.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it could be by putting it in a test environment, it could be like a phase 0, just to see, is it working well enough for us to think about testing in production, taking a larger risk.
Right.
Not necessarily taking a risk, but taking a slightly larger risk than putting it directly into production. Any other questions? Yes.
Like Mike.
Okay. You gotta help me out here. I'm fuzzy on the details, but I heard a story about some guy that just got caught recently, and he would go into people's PCs, take control of their cameras, and watch them walk around the house. Ooh. And he didn't do it on a wide scale. That was the kicker. He did it on a small scale, thousands of computers instead of millions, and he didn't let the thing go up like a virus and go wherever. So could behavior catch something that minuscule?
Could a behavioral analytics system?
So like, could a behavioral analytics system catch something that minuscule? It would be difficult not having the data to catch it, right? So I think the biggest problem with that sort of thing is if it's a person who's targeting individuals that aren't contributing their usage data to a central platform where it can be analyzed centrally, that's where you get into those problems, right? So like, could these techniques have caught it? Yes. Having the data, of course, but the question is, where is that data? If that data exists only within all of the individual PCs that are infected, then probably not. Now, if some of those PCs belonged to an organization, right, they infected that machine when that machine went home with a user, and that machine is reporting back telemetry data to an organization that has a behavioral analytics solution, yes, it potentially could have caught it. Now, in those circumstances, probably what happens is, having come from a blue team at an organization, is that when you find something like that, you say, oh, that's bad, we're going to reuse that machine, and then you never tell anybody, right? So that data doesn't make its way anywhere else. So these things have to be seen centrally in order for those patterns to be discovered in a way that they can help everybody. So kind of, we're still in this every organization for themselves mentality a lot, which doesn't really help everyone. So hopefully I ISACs will start to become less stigmatized over time. We'll start to share more information that helps. It's a good question, though.
So he's referring to the incident with the person from Royalton. I believe it was a McAfee silver product.
Okay. Gotcha. And then law enforcement found out?
Yeah. But it finally infiltrated the business and some other vendor product and something kind of like this. That's the product.
Yeah. That's how it goes.
Any other questions? Another question.
Have you given this presentation to the Democratic National Convention?
Have I given this presentation to the DNC? I know I'm sharing your joke for the benefit of everyone else. No, I have not. I have not. I'm kind of hoping that this will get me an invite.
So, I'm kind of going back to the beginning of the presentation. You were very specific in your differentiation between actions and behaviors being a collection of related actions. So are those behaviors predefined in a lot of these analytic systems, or are they partly predefined and do the systems themselves, so the individual actions that start to create meta behaviors, correlate behaviors that you also start tracking?
From what I've seen so far, they're usually fairly predefined, but they will be like, okay, so sorry, I forgot to repeat the question for everybody. I made the distinction between actions and behaviors, right? Actions being small scale, individual things typically, and behaviors being collections of actions that are aggregated together into a behavior. And the question is, do these systems typically have predefined behaviors that they're looking for, or do they kind of train themselves to locate their own new behaviors? The stuff that I've seen so far is, we're still kind of early on in this space, right? That it's mostly predefined behaviors. And the hard part is you want to catch behaviors, but you also want to not have a lot of alerts, right? Because the more alerts you get, the more you got to sift through. So right now, this space is kind of looking for specific behaviors and keeping it to behaviors that are interesting, generally interesting for analysts to look at. And I think it'll start to expand as more people ask that sort of question, or they kind of get bored of the alerts that they're getting, or they'll start to ask, like, how can you show me about other things that are happening in my network?
It's kind of like the supervised machine learning, where if you were looking at actions and letting the machine say, okay, we've got all these things happening with this known bad actor, and you can see the correlation now that all these things happen, and then you have the human review that and say, yes, that was definitely a bad action, which also behavior is really strange.
Oh yeah, that's a good. Yeah, that's a good. You could create a feedback loop between the machine and the human, and say, and let the machine generate suggestions, right? And say, this looks like a new kind of behavior. What do you think about it, human? And have the human say, no, I don't care, or yes, I think that's interesting. And that could create a feedback loop to start to train the machine to locate new things. The trade-off there is then you have to have your analysts look at more of those things and do that training. Which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can cause fatigue, right? If they have a lot of things to look through. So again, it's all trade-offs, right? Engineering is always trade-offs between one extreme and another. Yes?
What if a company were to purchase a product and the bad actor is already there?
Oh, yeah, good question. What if somebody gets a behavioral analytics solution and they put it in their network, but there's already a bad actor on the network? My go-to there is we talked about the two different types of analysis, the time-based analysis and the peer-based analysis. And the time-based analysis gets fooled by that, right? Time-based analysis, if the learning period there's a corrupt behavior during the learning period, then the time-based analysis engine learns the bad behavior as normal, right? It never successfully flags it as an anomaly. That's why you want to do both. That's why you also want to do the peer-based analysis, so that the infected machine or infected machines don't behave like the other users and machines on the network, right? So they stick out like a sore thumb, unless of course they're all infected. And then and if you haven't noticed it, then you have big, big problems, right? Other questions? All right, well, thank you very much.